Welcome, everyone, to the third and final installment in the Texas Digital Library's summer webinar series on AI and machine learning. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have created a community notes document in which you can collaboratively collect notes and where we'll share any links mentioned. You'll find a link to that in the chat box, and you can also access it by scanning the QR code on this slide. You can also drop your questions in the notes doc, or we'll add your questions to it from the chat. Also, in the community notes, you'll find our TDL community agreement. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Christy Park, who will be moderating today's session to introduce the session format and the presenters.
Thank you so much, Courtney. Welcome, everybody. It's wonderful to see so many of you here, and we appreciate your time. Uh, it, we're really excited about today's webinar and know you're going to get a lot out of it as well. It goes without saying maybe that artificial intelligence has shown itself to have a lot of potential to reshape everything we're doing with research, teaching, and library services across higher education. And throughout this short webinar series that we've been doing this summer, we've been surfacing just a handful of aspects of that transformation to showcase some of AI's possibilities and its limitations in helping to solve problems and assist us in our missions as academic and research libraries. And if you are interested, if you missed any of the previous webinars, we invite you to view the recordings of those webinars on the TDL YouTube channel. We'll put a link to that playlist in chat, and the recording from this presentation and session today will join those later this week. We're culminating this series by hearing from TDL members about their experiences, and we're delighted to welcome a wonderful group of representatives from 4 of our member institutions who are going to share some about AI-related projects they're working on, lessons they've learned, and evolving perspectives on the role of AI and machine learning in their respective libraries. So I'm going to introduce them momentarily and then hand the mic to them to each give a really short lightning talk presentation about their work. And after that, we'll bring all of these panelists back together for a moderated discussion on the role of AI in libraries. And we'll be sure to leave some time at the end for your questions as well. So if you think of a question at any point in today's webinar, please feel free to ask it in chat or add it to the questions section of the community notes doc, as Courtney said, and we'll be sure to get to it at the end as we have time. You'll also have the opportunity to unmute yourself and ask your questions and make your comments as well if you prefer at that time. So with that, I'm very pleased to welcome our panelists. They are Audrey Stewart, Assistant Director of Information Literacy and Instruction at Texas State University. And from Southern Methodist University, we have Dr. Carrie Johnston, Associate Dean for Research and Digital Strategy, as well as Megan Hoyer, Director of Educational Initiatives. Dr. Alex Martin is the GIS and Geospatial Data Coordinator at UT Austin Libraries. And last but certainly not least, we have Joshua Bin, Director of Data and Digital Scholarship from Baylor University Libraries. So we're going to start things off with Audrey, and then she'll hand things off to the SMU folks, followed by Alex and then Joshua. So Audrey, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you so much. Hi, everybody. My name is Audrey Stewart. I am the Assistant Director of Information Literacy and Instruction here at Texas State University. My focus for today's panel is mostly on generative AI, library workforce development, and more specifically on information literacy instruction and research skills. Next slide. So a little bit about me. My background and my first life was spent as a secondary educator. I taught high school English, world history, civics, and economics before joining libraries in 2017. I was kind of a jack of all trades at a community college as a librarian. All of that experience, I think, is important and relevant to today's conversation because it has me deeply invested in information literacy and instruction, which lends itself most recently to career development for people on my team and in my org. So my current work involving generative AI specifically has looked like looking at kind of many different parts and pieces through the lens of a manager, as a supervisor, as a teacher. There's a lot of overlap with how I kind of approach my management style with what I was like as a teacher. I co-lead a department of early career librarians. So I think AI has had a very unique piece, I think, in their transition from school to practice into the field. And so kind of helping them as they start out with this newness, in some ways unfamiliar territory. I oversee the instructional work of the library, including course instruction, workshops, special instruction, asynchronous material development, and lots of other things like building crafts all day today for back to school tomorrow. I'm currently involved in navigating co-curricular ideas to support the Texas State community. And part of what I think that will look like is information literacy in the form of possible micro-credentials. The dream is to have a Library 101 type class. So yeah, what's next? Next slide, please. So I thought it would be most helpful. I've been at Texas State for 2 years, which also kind of tracks with a little bit of the growth here at the university when it comes to AI. So I joined Texas State in the fall of 2024. Um, all things AI, this is 2 years post ChatGPT. It was the Wild West. Everybody was figuring it out, not just in the library, but I think the vibe across campus was hair on fire. What are we doing? Who, what, where, when, why. Those were excited, were running with it. Those that were hesitant were kind of heels dug in. Fast forward to spring of 2025, I started to see, at least in the org, more people playing around with Copilot, Microsoft Copilot. We also had a pilot license for Perplexity. So people were starting to play around a little bit, both kind of like back of house tech services, as well as some of the people on my instruction team. So I started to see a little bit more of like playing around, still no firm and fast initiatives. And then in February of 2025, we joined the AI literacy project with Ithaca SNR, myself and two of my colleagues. And the goal here was to gain perspective from our faculty and students via interviews on all things AI literacy, what they knew, what they didn't know, who should be responsible for it, et cetera. And then leading up to summer 2025, I think my first aha moment was a little bit with like the heels dug in, but then also seeing people that were curious, flying ahead. Uh, Teammate and I just decided to come up with a SMART goal, an AI SMART goal, kind of a step one of this AI learning path idea. We had ideas for professional learning communities or PLCs, how we could maybe crisscross other areas in the library to both help each other, but then also to maybe break down some of these like scary barriers. So where are we now? Next slide, please. This is the question that I came up against kind of repeatedly, both in my one-on-one meetings with my direct reports, on team meetings, and again, when I would show up, even like in staff meetings. It seemed like there was this divide that was starting to happen with, I had high flyers that really wanted to dive into the SMART goal, be very structured with their learning. They knew exactly what they wanted to play around with. That's not to say that they didn't have some of the same kind of telltale concerns that others had. But the high flyers wanted to fly, and then I still had quite a group of people that were just like a hard no. And then, of course, people along here in the middle. So I had an opportunity to go to the ARL President's Institute, which happened to be 2 very long days of ideating and problem solving. Next slide, please. So I arrive in Chicago. I'm there for 48 hours with all brilliant library people, library connected people. I was brave enough to pitch my problem, which was that question. And my group made, so I ended up working with about 6 or 7 other colleagues on that question. And these were some of the things that I came up with, or that we came up with as a group. This idea of individual learning paths. I continuously see both last year and, or I guess springtime leading up to now, the value of playtime. We're starting to see AI studios pop up, all kind of wrapped up in this idea of either structured or unstructured playtime. And then some scaffolded learning and guided learning. Next slide. So this is kind of where we are at now. I just kind of gave you a little overview of what spring looked like and wrapping up that Ithaca project. This summer, I would say has been kind of taking some of those ideas around the scaffolded learning, iteration number 2 of the SMART goal, some self-assessment, and kind of getting at like where are people now, two years post my arrival, 4 years post ChatGPT, when we look at students, what they're being exposed to, when we look at syllabi. I'll get into some of the more like Texas State vibes when we have our discussion. But these are some of the things that kind of came out of this summer, both the ALA guidelines, Dr. Leo Lowe out of University of Virginia, and this idea of the CARE approach. That's something that we've been exploring on the instruction team, of how to approach students who are now using like AI answers first in their research. Revisiting job duties, digital proficiencies, what does this look like from an accountability perspective and like a management perspective? And I think most importantly, being able to carve out on the calendar playtime for everybody. So this is kind of where we're at now, is really getting a little more structured with some of these learning paths, really diving into playtime, and being able to provide opportunities that are guided discussions, much like what you might hear today, but that still kind of lend themselves to some organic sharing and learning. So that's Texas State. I'm going to pass it off to Megan at SMU Libraries.
All right, thank you. So again, my name's Megan Hoyer. I'm the Director of Educational Initiatives for Southern Methodist University, and I'm joined by my colleague, Carrie, who's going to speak a bit later. She's our Associate Dean of Research and Digital Strategy. But I'm going to start by talking about what we're doing kind of on the instructional side. So next slide, please. So kind of similar topic to what Audrey was talking about is thinking about how do we build capacity. And so some of the things that we were thinking about early on was we created a cross-department AI team. So at that point in time, that was an internal team of librarians that covered research and instruction. That was important for us to do early on because there were so many projects to be done, things we had to keep up with. And this really gave Carrie and I a team to support that work, to support all that we had to learn. And we were able to delegate more, create subgroups to kind of tackle those projects. The thing that I really like about working with a team like this is that we are creating not just a team to create the things that we need to create, but also a team of leaders within the AI space inside the library. So that, you know, everybody who's working on AI and instruction within the team can be a leader to the other teaching librarians that we have. And so people who have joined that team, even if they joined because they were interested, the fact that they're working with it a lot gives them the experience and hands-on learning that they can then share with others in their libraries and kind of help us spread the word across the libraries. Another thing that we worked on is developing instructional support materials. And these are ostensibly for faculty, but they're also for us. So one of the earliest things that we produced is a set of student learning outcomes. So AI literacy within information literacy, what does that mean? What should students be learning? And what are the associated kind of learning activities and exercises you could be doing with that? The goal of this is obviously to support faculty, but also to help define for us what it means for what does AI literacy mean in libraries and what is our area of responsibility within the university, and to help communicate those boundaries. So that was an early addition to our materials. We have Canvas modules. We have 3 separate Canvas modules that faculty could then take and use in their classes. We have a research guide that's like everything about research with generative AI. these are really helpful for our community. We can point to them, but it's also for our librarians. So one of the things we recently did was rethink a way of teaching, evaluating AI output. And so we worked on that as a group. That becomes a thing we're using with faculty. It's a thing librarians can use for their own teaching. The other thing that we've been doing to help build capacity is original and institutional research projects. So like Audrey mentioned, the Ithaca study at their university, we also participated with that study. And so that was important in learning about our own people. And in fact, I just published today a report that took our SMU data and analyzed that and put that out to the university. And so far, it's been getting a lot of clicks from our faculty. They're really interested to see the results of that. Other projects that we've been doing is a study on our students using the AI tool Research Assistant that's in Primo, of how that's helping their how they're using it and how that's helping their research. We're also embarking on a project this fall on AI and the relationship with AI and student search strategies. So some of this is research that we do externally, but it's also really helpful to collect that data and that understanding of your own students and faculty. Next slide, please. So a lot of this is leading to kind of how do we position the libraries within the university structure as a thought leader in this space? And this is a thing that I was thinking about before AI came around, but I feel like it's even more important now that we be proactive with how we are asserting with the university where we live within this space. So I think we all know libraries tend to be sometimes misunderstood of what we actually do. And when a new thing like AI comes out, I think it's really important for us to establish this is how libraries relate to AI, how we relate to AI literacy, so that we kind of claim that space and move toward claiming it fairly early on. So some of the things we've been doing, we have a research and teaching spotlight that goes out monthly to faculty, where we can kind of highlight the work that we're doing. We have blog posts that we're putting out, really thinking about developing content that feels practical, but also maybe creative for the faculty. I always thought, like, you know, we have really smart librarians. How do we highlight the things that they know and position the librarians as experts within their own right? And in thinking about how we're positioning our place, I thought about the wider university and kind of the messages that are coming out, and where does the library fit within that? And really, to me, there's kind of two aspects of it, that the library is a neutral space. We're always the connector across libraries. And so no matter your positionality around AI, if it's a little scary, if you're excited about it, it's like we're here for you to have the conversations you want to have about AI and how to kind of grapple with what's going on. So our kind of neutral position within this. The other part that I saw as being a thing that was missing in the wider university conversations was, how are we thinking critically about AI itself? That we're not just excited about it. Yes, we are, but also we're going to think about it, you know, and bring in some critical information literacy alongside that. So we're trying to fill that role for the university. So next slide. We also thought about, how do we talk to students? Of course, we're doing, you know, in-class instruction, and we're trying to put out the guide and all of that. But, you know, how do we just directly talk to students? So we have been doing a series of AI literacy campaigns. So beyond, and we want to try to reach a broad base as possible. So what you're seeing are materials actually from a year ago. So at that point, it's like, what we have to get the word out. What is the basic 7 things you have to know about AI? And so we had a series of weekly emails. You can see the picture. There's digital signage that was around campus. We put out kind of some instructional materials that faculty could use that go alongside the campaign, and really advocating for faculty to use that with students to kind of help just get the word out. So this year, it hasn't gone out yet. It's going out in a week this year. It's around critical thinking with and about AI is our theme for this year. Next slide. And finally, instruction-wise, I think partnering with faculty is the most important thing that we could be doing because they're going to have the bigger reach beyond what the librarians can individually do in the classroom. Partnering with faculty, they're going to have the reach that that we need to get. And so we started an AI and research assignments cohort. So this is a group of faculty that we've run this. This is now the third iteration that we've done. So for each, they have a semester. They're paid a stipend. We get together. We have some meetings together, like a big workshop to kind of kick it off. So these are faculty who have put in proposals that they want to integrate AI literacy, or they want to adapt their research assignment with AI in mind within that semester. And so the idea is empowering them, giving them a little bit of resources to help support the work that they're doing, but then we can use what they're learning to market that to other faculty. And so what you're seeing here is a picture from our AI Uncorked event. So this wrapped up the spring semester. So this is one of our cohort members who is talking to a whole group of faculty about what she learned, and we had a whole panel that came in. And it was called AI Uncorked because we gave them wine, because you got to drink a glass of wine when you talk about AI sometimes. So we see kind of this as the key kind of ways of reaching faculty is through developing community for them, through them being able to share with each other, and even having like a little bit of social aspect to it. So I'm going to turn it over to Carrie to talk about our work with research.
Great. Thanks, Megan. So I support original research at SMU Libraries. And in summer 2025, as I was facing the challenge of being able to use a tool, for example, Consensus or Undermine, to create a literature review, I wasn't necessarily able to evaluate it across disciplines because I don't have that deep expertise in every single discipline. So in summer 2025, I developed AI for research cohorts. These were also incentivized. We supported 14 faculty from across disciplines. We asked them to take their existing research and bibliographies and then run those lit reviews in different AI-powered tools and tell us what worked in their discipline and didn't. So it was really great to get those results. And from that cohort, I opened up a peer-to-peer cohort opportunity. So those 14 faculty were invited to apply. We had 4 who took me up on the offer, and basically they ran cohorts within their disciplines. So they took the model that I started that summer and they extended to faculty and grad students the opportunity to devise AI workflows for their research. So those only recently concluded. We came up with we got a lot of really good feedback from the disciplines. And just very briefly, the results. 2 of the results is we have this great collaboration with OIT. They are providing researchers with expertise to build custom locally hosted small AI applications for researchers. So we had some of our cohort in psychology was working with them. And then from that cohort, I realized the need for an AI and digital research librarian who could help with data management, who could help with prompt engineering, evaluating output. So we have run that search, and we will be welcoming a AI and digital research librarian in January. So we're very excited about those 2 results coming out of the cohorts. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Alex at UT.
Great. Hi, all. I'm Alex Martin. I'm the GIS and Geospatial Data Coordinator here at UT Austin Libraries, and I'm going to take a narrower lens here and talk about the use cases that I have been working on for data management and processing. And in the kind of GIS coordinator role that I'm in, that there's a lot of AI application involved with, I think, GIS and geospatial data. So I've really felt the need to, I think experiment with different AI applications that I've had the opportunity to work with and kind of test the waters to see, what's useful, what is maybe kind of murky and what's not useful in terms of my position providing GIS services to the campus community. And next slide, please. So I think that the big success here is what I want to focus on in terms of what I have found to be really helpful from using AI tools. So I think over the past few years, I've been able to kind of work in like a sandbox environment with a variety of AI tools. I've also been provided with a tier of Microsoft Copilot that's kind of allowed for some integration with different Microsoft software, things like that. But I think that the kind of biggest change for me in terms of the sort of usefulness of AI tools has been over the past 6 months or so when Claude has been made available for folks here at UT Austin first for kind of early adopters, but I think more recently we've had like a campus enterprise option to be able to use. And so I've found that like Claude has been, I think, first, I think really powerful in producing results, some good and some bad, as I kind of tested the waters with more sort of methods, producing GIS products, seeing like, okay, can I produce useful tools for like consultations and actual like research outputs? That has been kind of mixed. A lot of that stuff is too complicated and the tool will just sort of run in directions that are hard to kind of contain and keep a track of when it gets sort of complicated. And that to me is dangerous territory when it comes to like research consultations and like, folks who are going to have to, outline their methods and, a really detailed and precise way. But where I have found a lot of success is specifically crafting interfaces using Claude. And so this workflow has, I created a lot of, I think, really useful tools that, I've been testing out here. And so generally that workflow has been producing HTML files written by Claude, using the kind of manually produced and maintained databases that I work with every day that contain geospatial data. And so I manage our Texas Geodata portal where we host like GIS ready data sets from our libraries collections here. And then I also administer our Esri license here on campus, which for those unfamiliar is kind of the main like GIS like proprietary software that is sort of the professional standard in the US for GIS software. And so with those kind of two main things that I manage, there are a lot of I think pretty high quality metadata files and then databases behind those. And so kind of then using Claude to write HTML to kind of wrap those things up in new and creative ways has been a really interesting like pilot project for me in the past few months. And then I'm able to host those HTML files then using GitHub Pages. So I'm able to do that for free without having to purchase a URL destination or rely on our library IT department to actually put up and maintain those HTML sites. And the example here I'm showing is an interface is produced for internal purposes. So it's a student worker project which takes scanned maps that we have that are just that. They're scanned images. They don't have geospatial data associated with them, and do what's called georeferencing with them, which supplies geospatial control points that allows those scanned maps to be represented in GIS software in the kind of digital space where they were produced for. So that the next slide here then shows kind of what this tool looks like. So that previous example was sort of the home screen for these student workers who are we hired to help georeference these scanned maps. And as we were scoping out this project, it's kind of, I think at the as Claude was being introduced as an option for us, and there was a meeting we had with our library's IT folks where we were talking about, oh, well, it would be really nice if we could kind of supply on a website a nice list of maps for the students to georeference. And the LIT folks were quickly like, well, that sounds great, but it's not really in our bandwidth to make a website for you at the moment, which, extremely understandable. But then, through just experimenting and using Claude, I was able to, produce this kind of website that is hosted on our enterprise GitHub. So it's just available for the UT internal student workers that we have that can go and now work with these interactive lists. So we don't have to worry about sharing folders, organizing files, kind of interfacing, doing that. Instead, everything is just maintained on this GitHub page, and the students get this sort of interactive dynamic environment where there's a queue progress bar that they're able to mark when they've georeferenced things. And I think it adds a kind of light gamification, I like to think of it, and hopefully keeps them more kind of engaged with the materials. And then the great thing is then in the back end, everything is automated to then route to our servers and get updated to our geodata portal. And then there's human input with using an AI agent that prioritizes entries based on that human input of kind of lists of locations and years and collections that those maps belong to. So we're really able to kind of offload a lot of that work of worrying about the files and the folders and sharing, and just have everything live on a nice interface website that is also hopefully a pleasant and efficient experience for those student workers. And then the next slide here is an outward-facing example that's the same kind of workflow of HTML files to a GitHub page. And this comes from my work administering our Esri site, which I'm sure a lot of folks here are familiar with story maps. Typically, the story maps are housed within Esri and not really organized in very useful ways. It's kind of hard to find relevant story maps beyond just what's in a title or keywords that usually users don't actually supply keywords when they publish their story map. So I've worked with Claude to produce this HTML file that actually goes in and takes the back end data from Esri and then reproduces those the story map content in a way that's more findable. So there's a spatial search option there, and then you can easily kind of sort through all the content and search keywords, search by year created, things like that. So I haven't actually released this to the public yet, but still in the refining stage. But certainly, something I envision will help to kind of amplify all the great story mapping that's going on the UT campus. And I think we're ready for the next slide here. But the big takeaway here, beyond just my use case of HTML files, Claude is great at writing them, creating these interfaces, is that I think it's what it's really good at is to me, if I can use the metaphor of the kind of hard-earned good metadata and database structure that I haven't found great success with AI producing that kind of stuff. It instead seems really good at sort of putting the final packaging on that. So kind of wrapping the bow, presenting that stuff really well. So I think that's encouraging to me, that like the skills that folks in libraries tend to have, right, which is like producing good metadata and database structure. I don't see now, sort of being replaced uh, by AI. I think, in fact, it's more valuable than ever, because those sorts of things, that we're good at, can be, I think, enhanced by these AI tools to spin up new and creative ways to present that metadata that, at least for me, for a long time, has lived in folders and servers, and not always been presented publicly or to the right audience in the ideal way. But now with these AI tools, again, kind of use these as a way to test, refine, and come up with these sort of polished interfaces to improve user and worker experience interacting with the data and services that I supply. And yeah, I will now pass it on to Josh to finish up this lightning talk portion.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm going to focus on the next 8 minutes or so on transitioning AI into part of the research infrastructure. But let's start off by thinking about the difference between a calculator and a spreadsheet. With a calculator, we can enter any expression we like. If we enter 5 plus 2, it's going to output 7. If we enter 12 minus 3, it's going to output 9. It is a fantastic invention. But a spreadsheet is on a whole different level. Using a spreadsheet, we can enter a single formula, or we can chain multiple formulas, and it can process hundreds of thousands of rows at once. With a spreadsheet, we can have dozens or hundreds of formulas all working in concert across rows and columns. A spreadsheet makes these calculations so much more efficient than manually using a calculator. This allows a spreadsheet to operate on much larger scales than if we were relying on hand calculators for every single calculation. Many of our conversations about generative AI still regard it as the calculator in this analogy. Ask a single question, receive a single response. As with the calculator, this is powerful and it has its place, absolutely. At Baylor University Libraries, and my role specifically, we are increasingly interested in the spreadsheet, meaning how can we support researchers wanting to work with AI at scale and not solely to ask questions and receive answers. We want AI, in effect, to become part of the research infrastructure. In other words, what really happens when AI stops being something we chat with and becomes part of the research infrastructure or process itself? Slide, please. Now, like many academic libraries, Baylor is doing the work that you would most likely expect. Research guides, such as this Student Guide to Generative AI, a deep focus on AI literacy, responsible use instruction, and acquiring tools to support researchers. Those services have been very well received and are being championed by my amazing colleagues, many of which I know are attending this webinar right now. But alongside that great work, we also have been exploring the second model of AI use, where AI becomes part of the research infrastructure, and this is my focus on this panel today. Slide, please. Now, what do we mean by research infrastructure? I mean research that is reproducible and deterministic, giving researchers access to the plethora of settings that are not typically accessible via chat interfaces, ensuring secure data privacy, being able to audit and review the reasoning behind each and every AI decision, fixed costs that are much more convenient for libraries and universities to support rather than API fees, and the ability to ensure that everything can be stable and continuous in the near and long term. To respect the time, I will only chat through a handful of these. First, reproducibility. Working with local AI means we're working with open models, meaning they can be downloaded and used without any API fees and on local hardware, provided, of course, that you or we have the hardware to run the model. This means that a specific model and a specific model version can be locked in. While Google's flagship model is Gemini, they also maintain a line of open models named Gemma. While OpenAI's flagship is ChatGPT, they also maintain an open line of models named GPT OSS. While flagship models are updated and superseded regularly, removing access to older models, open models are downloaded, and the same version can be downloaded again and again, regardless of whether new versions have been released. Another huge impact on reproducibility is adjusting model settings such as temperature. Temperature controls the creativity of a model, and chat interfaces typically have the temperature set at a 0.7 to 0.8 out of 1.0, really to keep the model's answers creative and varied. But for research, we typically adjust this down to a 0.1 or a 0.0 for maximum reproducibility. This will make the model's responses extremely similar and very deterministic. Seed value and top P are two additional settings that can be tuned for consistency rather than creativity. Next is privacy. As the entire workflow happens on local hardware with no API calls made outside of the network, the hardware can be run completely in secure airplane mode if desired. Last, auditability. We can have the model output its reasoning for every single decision, leading to multiple iterations of HITL. HITL stands for human in the loop, which is where we iteratively review the model's output and reasoning, make adjustments, run again, human in the loop again, and so on and so forth until the workflow achieves a level of trust for the researchers. Slide, please. I hope we have time for two examples. Here is the first. For a large reference weeding project, such as the one that we are actively undertaking with our reference collection at Baylor, librarians often need background research on titles before they can make a decision. In this case, the model takes on the role of a research assistant. It investigates 13 specific librarian-defined questions, such as whether an item has been superseded, whether it's available online, how widely it's held, whether the topic is still relevant. The results are returned in spreadsheet form, but of course, the AI is making no decisions. All of the decisions are remaining with the librarian. We use the OpenGPT OSS model for this research, and we had many, many human-in-the-loop iterations before we achieved our current workflow. Next slide, please. Here is a screenshot of the top of the B reference classification list for that weeding project. The first 6 of the 13 questions I was able to fit in this screenshot. So you can see here, if you can see that, starting with Q1, GPT OSS processes each row individually, one at a time. Slide, please. A more complex example comes from a project with education faculty that we are supporting with local AI who are studying pre-service science teachers. Their goal is to help these future teachers better understand the beliefs and assumptions that shape how they teach. Things like how they think knowledge is constructed, the role of authority in the classroom, and how argument, dialogue, and language contribute to learning. Ultimately, they want to turn that analysis into a profile that teachers themselves can use for reflection and development. The researchers define the analytical frameworks and the criteria. The AI workflow applies those frameworks across interview transcripts, open-ended survey responses, and classroom video, securely and privately identifying patterns and relationships, and producing scores, visualizations, and a narrative profile for each teacher. The researchers remain responsible for the method and interpretation. AI is performing defined analytical work inside the research process. We spent an entire year, more than a year, meeting once a month, often twice per month, through a very robust human-in-the-loop process. Again, this is the spreadsheet model, not the calculator model. The researchers are not asking a chatbot to evaluate a teacher. They have defined their research method, and AI performs specific analytical tasks repeatedly within that method. After a year of iterative refinements, the research is now at a good place where the researchers feel confident incorporating it into their full research workflow. While I'm only listing these two examples here, we spent the last year and a half plus partnering with many researchers across Baylor, assisting them to include local AI into their research, data extraction and classification workflows of primary sources, assisting with evidence synthesis tasks, as well as other library-focused projects such as AI-assisted authority control for named entities and AI-assisted LC authority reconciliation for oral history collections. Slide, please. For libraries, I think the implication is that we need to think beyond which AI tools we should license or which chatbots we should focus on when we teach. Those things absolutely matter, and they are important of our work also here at Baylor. But if AI increasingly moves from the calculator to the spreadsheet, using that analogy, from individual interactions to repeatable research processes, then institutions need infrastructure, need expertise, governance, and partnerships to support that work. Libraries, we do not need to own or control all of that infrastructure, but I think we have an important role to help shape it. We spent the last few years helping researchers learn how to use the AI calculator, as we are striving to do at Baylor. I believe without reservation that libraries are in the perfect position to align with campus partners like IT and high performance computing to help researchers to build the spreadsheet. And with that, back to you, Christy.
Thank you, Josh. And thank you to all of our panelists for those wonderful presentations. That was amazing. Thank you for laying the groundwork for a great discussion. These four institutions and the presentations here really showcase the broad range of impacts these technologies are having on libraries and library work and research, from, instruction and workforce development to the infrastructure and software development work. And so this is a really, I think, bracing kind of variety of projects and work that y'all are talking about. We're going to now move into our moderated discussion. So we can go ahead and stop sharing slides, and I'll ask our panelists if they are mute, if their video is muted, to unmute your video. And we'll begin the discussion. And I want to start with kind of a general question for everybody, just to kind of set the groundwork for discussion. I think some of you talked about this in pieces in your presentations, but I'd like to ask each of you to talk about the status of AI infrastructure at your institution currently at the university level. So, what's provided? What's the posture of the university? Just what's the status of that at your institution, and how is the institution communicating that across the university? And I'll start with well, Audrey, would you like to start us off on that question for Texas State?
Yeah. So when I think of the infrastructure here at Texas State, there's a couple things that come to mind, and it's kind of spread out across campus. So I actually just completed my first required AI compliance training
Mm.
that's in the system. I'm sure we're all familiar with those. So that was the first. So that's one piece. We do have a Texas State AI hub out of our IT or ITAC department. And these are going to be all of the tools that we have access to. Currently, this includes Copilot, Gemini, Notebook LM, and we have, I think, a handful of ChatGPT licenses. We also have quite a few what I would describe as like teaching and learning materials out of the Division of Research. So we have modules, we have some items in like Canvas Commons. We have access to LinkedIn and Coursera for our own, like learn on our own. We also are going to have March is going to mark our third annual AI and Teaching and Learning Conference. So that has been well attended the previous 2 years. And then we also, I think, is new coming for now because school starts tomorrow, are the AI course designators out of the provost office. So in terms of infrastructure, I would say it's pretty spread out. Stuff's happening. Um, I would I wonder what it would look like to have a more fully organized like campus team. And I'm not really sure what that looks like at a school this size.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the federated nature of most large universities make that somewhat challenging. Does
Yeah.
Alex, what about at UT Austin?
Yeah, I think it's fairly similar to what Audrey was mentioning in terms of our enterprise IT provides a kind of portal to multiple AI like LLM tools, including like ChatGPT, Microsoft Copilot, a few versions of that. One is just like the chat. The other is I think a paid tier of like interaction with the different Microsoft 360 applications. And then more recently, yeah, the Anthropic Claude has been added to that. I think with but the kind of standard like Claude like chat model, but then also the like Claude Cowork and Claude Code that allowed you to kind of take a more like agentic approach and then like a code-based approach using that interface. Prior to that, there was also this tool called UT Spark, which provided this kind of like free and exploratory use of the different tools in this kind of like limited like sandbox environment. That was recently retired with, I think, I can't really speak for like the strategic leadership of how those decisions are made, but it seems like with maybe the idea of like they've maybe I identified a more like unified strategy in terms of tools that they want to provide for campus. And then I think there are also like there's the UT Sage platform, which is like an AI tutor platform that works with Canvas, and there is some like limited, I think, interaction with Gemini as well. But I don't think that is like approved for actually sharing any kind of like sensitive data or with any kind of enterprise protection of like sharing information for training based off of that. And so that's what I've like experienced just like personally as like a user of these tools and in just being subscribed to these changes. I know like it's a behemoth university and certainly I think across different departments that there's lots of dynamism and working with different tools. And there's the Texas Advanced Computing Center, which offers, I think, infrastructure and is really aiming to position themselves as kind of world class destination for like supercomputing with improved AI infrastructure moving forward. But yeah, I think it still continues to seem quite dynamic with the goal. At least it seems again just from an individual user perspective of um, offering multiple options and kind of staying on top of what seems to be like the industry standard tools that can go out to students and staff and faculty for use.
Yeah, dynamic is the word, isn't it? What about at SMU? Similar, or are there differences in how the university is rolling out some of these infrastructures?
Well, I'd like to brag on SMU libraries because we are providing consensus campus-wide. So we're the ones that have a campus-wide license to an AI tool right now. So if you're not familiar with consensus, it searches academic literature databases and writes lit reviews. And so that's been very popular. And then there's been a lot of opt-in things at like sandbox things like Alex was talking about at SMU. So in addition to the cohorts that Megan and I have been running, where faculty do get stipends and pro licenses to certain tools, IT has run what they call the Coalition of the Willing. So people opt in and they get advanced license to ChatGPT and talk about how well it works. And university administration is saying that it is a priority to get a campus-wide institutional license for something, and that's all. That's the only information that we have. We don't know. We don't know what comes next and when.
Yep, it's always changing. And Joshua, what about at Baylor?
At Baylor, I would describe us as really being in a transition from experimenting with tools to trying to develop a more coordinated AI infrastructure. We're really trying to catch up now. We've already have a quite of a growing ecosystem of licensed AI tools. Um, the campus is supporting, and the library especially, supporting AI literacy along with our partners at the Academy for Teaching and Learning at Baylor. But research computing resources, a lot of individual units on campus are experimenting with AI in some pretty sophisticated ways. At the same time, while the tools are already here and many of us are using them, Baylor's really still working toward a more formal structure for governance, trying to figure out approved technologies, data privacy, acquisition, institutional support, um, to give an idea of how well integrated I think at Baylor the university libraries are, is that I am actually serving on the university AI strategy task force that is developing strategies and policies right now in those areas with implementation, hopefully in the fall. So I would not categorize Baylor as having a finished AI ecosystem yet, but the pieces are increasingly being connected, and a lot of the communication is happening through university committees, trainings, guidance, and a lot of partnerships around campus.
That's
Unlike, yeah,
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, didn't mean to talk
no,
over you.
one more brief. Unlike many of the previous panelists, Baylor University does not yet provide any premier AI chat tools like a Claude or a ChatGPT, which is likely partly why we have really doubled down on providing infrastructure support for local AI technology.
That's
Now
really
I'm
in
done.
Now that's really interesting. And I talking about the library's role in the campus-wide sort of strategic planning around AI leads me to my next question, actually, which is bringing this down a level to your libraries. And I think, Megan, you talked about this too at SMU libraries. How are you positioning? How are each of your libraries positioning yourself and the libraries in the midst of these changes as a partner for campus or as a leader on campus around AI and machine learning? And I guess, Josh, you've kind of spoken to that a little bit. Um, Megan, do you want to speak it or carry any more to this question of like where you see the library and understanding that you're not necessarily speaking on behalf of your entire library, but just kind of how you see it?
I mean, I will say and maybe at SMU we're a bunch of overachievers, but it's a very kind of competitive environment for messaging to the whole campus. And we have a very large active OIT department. And so really early conversations, it kind of was captured by our IT. And and so there's a piece of this where when we start talking about students using AI or how it's impacting faculty researchers, we really felt like it was important that we make sure we establish where libraries fit with that. And so, for example, early on, IT had, and they're lovely people, and I love working with them. They had a website, AI at SMU, and it was like, we're going to be the hub that brings everything AI together. And we were on that page, and that's great, but we have more to say, and we have more that, and we need to establish our own presence and identity. And so pretty early on, one of the pieces we did was build our own webpage, that was AI at SMU libraries, and I think we have been at this point, because we've been iterating this, fairly successful at starting to attach in faculty minds what it is we're doing, and that the libraries has a piece of that. I will say subscribing to consensus went a long way to raise our kind of awareness. That alone kind of did it. But I think there was appreciation of the instructional materials that were going out, and particularly on the part of faculty who are maybe AI hesitant. I find that they're more willing to talk to us, and because there's this atmosphere like, we are here for you too. And I don't have technology in my title, and so I think that's important, especially for our faculty instructors who are concerned about academic integrity, who are concerned about students, learning to think critically and write and read and all of that, and supporting them too.
Yes, that library is neutral space again. It's so important. So, Alex, Audrey, do y'all have anything you want to add on this question of library positioning?
Yeah, I would say, I don't know if I've just been pouring my Kool-Aid into everyone's cup. But we've kind of all moved into this collective space of like cautiously exploratory, which I think is an okay place to be. Like our tech people, again, it kind of comes back to that question for me. Really like as a supervisor, but also as a colleague, like we have some people who are building AI agents and playing around. Um, we still have people that are like just dipping their toe in the water. I don't personally think that this is something that can be rushed, either. I don't think libraries really have emergencies when it comes to stuff like this, even though I think the first couple years post ChatGPT launch in 2022, it definitely felt that way. I've had to walk myself back of like, this isn't an emergency. We're librarians and library specialists. So yeah, I think our partnership is definitely rooted in information literacy, making sure that the community feels supported again at whatever end of the spectrum that they're on. Um, I feel most positioned to support that because I don't know that there's enough support for the people that are just now like joining the conversation. Not really my place to say like if that's okay or not in higher ed. But it is. That is where they are at. And so kind of this question of like where are we gonna meet people at? So yeah, I would say the library, we're playing around. I'm currently looking at calendars, trying to carve out more of that playtime for us.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Alex, what about at UT?
Yeah, I would say in the libraries, similarly very exploratory at this stage. I think beginning to move towards a more kind of defined idea of like what our space can offer campus more broadly when it comes to AI. But yeah, again, in not sort of a position of crafting AI leadership within the libraries, I've felt very supported in kind of the ability to explore without the pressure to kind of, really enhance productivity or anything like that, and always felt supported if in kind of cases where want to kind of take that yeah critical stance of the limitations of
Yeah,
AI tools.
yeah. Great. Well, thank y'all. And in the interest of time, I'm going to move on into the next question and talk a little bit more specifically about this AI literacy and skill building that some of you have been really working on, and I know many libraries are working on. Thinking about that, I'll start with you, Megan, on this one. thinking about AI literacy, whether you're talking about instruction for faculty and students or kind of library focused instruction, what kinds of instruction and professional development have you found to be most successful and most effective? And is there anything that you've really decided, yeah, that didn't work. That was a failure. Let's move on.
Um, it's all been successful. No.
Wow, we found the
No,
100%
no,
successful
no,
project.
that is totally a joke. I feel like it's what we are right now is so experimental, so that I'm even the fact of like what's successful or what's failing, I'm not even thinking that way. We're all trying stuff and seeing what works, and then we keep trying. And so that's like I don't know when something, is like that didn't quite go the way maybe I thought it was going to go. It's like, well, we learned from that, and now we can take that to turn it into something else and be more successful the next time. That being said, I feel like the kind of the things that I feel like have been successful is reaching out and working with those faculty superstars who really want to ideate and be leaders, and creating a space for them to be able to share with other faculty, I feel like is so important. And I think that's one of the best things we could be doing, is just giving them the support they need. We had a lot of like positive feedback from faculty around being able to hear from each other and creating that sort of atmosphere. So I think that it's almost like we're not just teaching in your class, we're trying to build a culture of how we're approaching it and how we're working together, and how we want to kind of work this thing as a team. I think is, I don't know, the most important thing I think we could be doing. Yeah.
That's great. And Audrey, you've been working in this AI literacy space. Any thoughts about kind of what's working best at Texas State?
Yeah, I mean, I can probably speak most directly to like my team, and then like support across the org. I've had a lot of, I'm just gonna put my teacher hat on, and I know I have teacher bias. Accountability, structure, frameworks, like pre-assessing people where they're at, meeting them where they're at, moving from that place. It's also a lot of work. I've had some fellow middle managers, they're like, you do what? Like, doesn't that take a lot of time? And so to me, it's this question of like, how important is this topic? How important is this work? I look to like SMU, and like if I want my team to be able to show up in those spaces and do that work, they also need to have their own solid footing in that work. So how do I get this piece off the ground before we can show up in all these other places as research partners, et cetera? Um, and so, yeah, I would say like the accountability structure, just throwing something out there like, hey, you should all be AI literate and AI proficient. In what ways, in what areas, what does this look like? And so I would say like the second iteration of the AI SMART goal for us, again, with these caveats of there's enough customization to make it what you want it to be. I can think of a couple people specifically who just like took it and ran. And the accountability part of following up with them was very successful. So, yeah, I think when it comes to the classroom with faculty, am really excited to see processes come back. Um, so when there's been some, um, I don't know if I would say hesitation. I think maybe some groaning around like, oh, okay, we can't just submit a research paper. I have to check
Hmm.
the process, right? And so English teacher me is like, yes, the time has come. So I'm excited to see processes come back. I also am very aware that like faculty, like this is the work of centers for teaching and learning. Faculty need support because that may not be the thing that they're strongest in. And so again, where does the library and library partners show up with that scaffolded learning and information literacy instruction with the AI literacy as a piece of it, if the course lends itself to it, because I also don't think it's just like a one size fits all.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
What doesn't work is just saying, go get proficient with this now.
Yep. I think there is a lot of that too
Yeah.
across universities. And so you're absolutely right. There needs to be some structure and some specificity to
Yeah.
the goals there.
Yeah.
Um, so turning to the more sort of code-based interactions with these systems and development and infrastructure. And I'll start with Josh on this question. How are you or your library, how's your library thinking about locally hosted versus vendor hosted systems? And related in that may be some questions about how, and you brought this into your presentation, Josh, about data privacy. How are questions of data privacy and governance and licensing and things like that playing into those decisions? Oh, you're muted, Josh.
Thank you. Great question. Uh, at Baylor, I would say we're not thinking about or local AI or vendor provided AI as an either or choice. I think they each would make sense for different kinds of work. Commercial tools or vendor uh, commercially provided AI cloud tools that you would access via the API are always going to be easier to use and are going to give access to very, very capable models without having to maintain the technology ourselves. But for some research workflows, just like you mentioned, especially when they may be working with sensitive data, running the same analysis many times that would incur exponentially higher API fees, or if they would need more control over the model and its settings, running AI locally can then be very attractive. Like you mentioned, privacy is a big part of that decision. With local AI, we can keep the research data on our university controlled hardware. If necessary, we can run the entire analysis without an internet connection. With commercial systems, however, we have to think very carefully about the license that we're signing, what happens with the data after we complete the analysis, whether it can be retained or used by that vendor, and what kind of information the university will permit us to process there. So our approach really is to start with the research need and looking at the state of the data, the size of the data, and the data requirements, and then really to choose the environment that makes the most sense. Uh, Sometimes that's going to be a licensed commercial service, sometimes local AI. But what I've been seeing increasingly are researchers are starting to consider hybrid approaches where they may use some research funding if they have to work with a cloud AI provider. And if they are out of research funding or if they have another segment of their research that may be more sensitive, they can run that locally.
Yeah, that makes sense. Starting with the problem and the question and then making decisions based on how to solve that, right? That's the key, I think, for a lot of these decisions around AI. Anybody else want to jump in on this? How your institution is thinking about these questions of procurement or, internal development around this?
I'll
I
just
can
second
jump
what Josh
in.
said.
Carrie, you go first.
Well, I was just going to second what Josh said. I mean, exactly. I think that's brilliantly put and great
Hmm.
criteria for thinking about which one to use and yeah. So thank you for that, Josh.
Ditto. Alex?
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I will add that I think something that's a little bit limiting, at least for me at the moment, is like access to hardware to run those local models. And then we have run into some complications with being a state institution and kind of which local models that we're able to access. A lot of the kind of cutting edge stuff is coming from China, and there are definite limitations on what we're allowed to use in terms of like our security protocols in the university.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And a whole conversation we could have with this group that we may not have time for is around differences between doing this work at a private institution versus a state-funded one. And maybe we could get to that in the Q&A. I I'm gonna change things up from what I planned a little bit just because of time. And I'm going to save our wrap-up question for the end because I know we had a couple of questions that came through in the chat, and I want to get to make sure we get to those. And I'll remind everybody if you have questions that you want to put in chat, please do that. And we'll make sure they get asked here. But Courtney, did we have a couple questions that we want to ask from the audience at this point?
Yes, we had two come in for Audrey actually. And so I'll just go ahead and ask both of them. So first is folks really want to hear about AI playtime. And I think that framing is just, I think appealing. And also if you could say what the SMART goal you had was.
Yeah. So the AI playtime, actually, I think I was thinking in terms of like some of the events that we've had in the library that have been just complete like plays like coloring, painting pots, like true like the right power of play. Um, and I think I stumbled upon the value of AI playtime of really getting like this idea of getting people on board. I think that's where this came from probably like a year ago of my goodness, we all got to be in the boat together. We don't have to be rowing at the same speed, but we at least have to be in the boat together. So it was this idea of like, how can I get people in the boat? And then there was interest in some of the in training. So like IT did some training. And so I have been talking with we have a training and development specialist. And we have these learning labs that happen on Thursdays that are typically like somebody can sign up and anybody can kind of share with the org. It's all internal to the library. But we've been exploring this like AI playtime, where people need the accountability of the calendar invite. Again, with maybe like some guided structure of like what the time will look like, but by no means is it like a training, a sit and get. That it is, we have the labs upstairs. So this idea of being able to come together, try and fail, ask questions, get to see each other in person. Yeah, so that's kind of been the AI playtime, very unstructured. But I would say that accountability piece on the calendar has been like a big thing that I've been reading about. So kind of, I guess, along maybe running next to that, the AI SMART goal. This was first developed last summer. I'm happy to share it. I can link it in the community notes, so that other people can take it and like iterate on it. But it was a very specific like fall, 3 to 5 things that you want to accomplish for fall, spring, 3 to 5 things that you want to accomplish in the spring, again, depending on your area of work. So I oversee a learning engagement team. A lot of us are rooted with instruction, both as students and faculty. So a lot of theirs were some of them were building systems to better, I guess, their workflows. And then for other people, it really was this like, I'm concerned about the environment. So I need to spend fall reading 3 to 5 articles, meeting with my supervisor, talking through some of this like environmental anxiety, and then deciding what spring is going to look like. Learning outcomes for everyone were pretty similar with some adjustments, again, depending on if you were kind of on this like high end of the like go run with AI or like, oh, I'm just getting my feet wet with AI. So both the SMART goal and the playtime like work kind of in conjunction with each other. So yeah, thank you for asking.
Thank you. Thanks for those questions. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand if you want to ask it or add your question to chat and we will read it for you. While we're waiting for other questions to come in, I'm going to go ahead and ask this final question that I have, which is kind of getting at the push and pull in the yin and yang of of AI and our feelings about it. Um, where are you, and I'd like for each of you to answer, where are you still struggling or concerned or uncertain about AI? And on the flip side, what has you feeling optimistic in this space as we move forward into an evolving future, I think, with this work? And Josh, I wonder if you could start us off on this one.
All right. So this was about the um, uncertainty or struggling.
Hmm. Yes. Or what you're optimistic about.
I'm experiencing a total nothing. Can I not go first,
Yeah,
please?
of course.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to jump in?
I'm happy to jump in. The uncertainty and the struggling is also my optimism. My background is English literary studies and digital humanities, and for years we've been saying like where, don't give your data away, or these textual data sets, they're very powerful, they matter. And I think this is an opportunity for humanists to really shine. And then I struggle to convey that, and even to know as a humanist myself how to step up and to shine. So bringing the humanists into the conversation with the folks who are engineers and more tech focused is something I think is a huge opportunity. I think that my English folks have a lot to say about this, digital humanities, and so I think it's a great opportunity. So that's where a lot of my thinking is right now.
That's really interesting. It's similarly, I think when I'm looking at our repositories and the ways that they interact with um, the LLMs and thinking about the ways that they can improve things, but also the anxiety about all of that getting exploited and monetized in ways that are maybe problematic. That flip the two sides of the same coin, I think, are there. Anybody else?
I can go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
And I'm sorry about my camera. Speaking of technology infrastructure, my camera decided to stop working midstream. But I think one of the things that we struggle with, and we're kind of struggling with alongside our faculty, is just how rapidly everything is changing. And the second you think you have it pinned down, then you don't. And there's all kinds of ways of how do you design in the classroom to make sure students are learning and they're engaging with the work. And then the second you think you have a solution, they bring out something else and all of it changes. And so that's the struggle. Um, and then what I'm optimistic about is really kind of how our students are starting to think about AI and grapple with it. That work of we talked to them through the Ithaca study, and then we also interviewed them directly. And then I've had lots of conversations because we teach AI literacy in our coursework, is that they really are trying to figure out how they can maintain their own thinking. They're concerned about it. They want to keep their own agency and their humanity. And so I think I'm hopeful that our young people are trying to figure this out. And that's the best part that I can say about this whole thing.
That makes me feel hopeful too, Megan. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, Josh.
I would like to answer now, please.
Good.
I
Go for
thought
it.
about it for a moment, and I would say that the cause of the greatest degree of uncertainty or unease for me is really the environmental impact of all of these AI tools and chat interfaces that we're using. Um, while everyone here heard me talk at length about the advantages of local AI, it does not solve the environmental issue. It changes it from a centralized data center to just a little bit more electricity on whatever computer you're running the model on, but it really adds to the same amount per se. But on that level, on that same topic, the optimism I have is that the heavily quantized, the very models that they quantizing these large language models um, compresses them, makes them smaller, makes them able to run on lower level hardware like we can run on here or on high performance computing machines. They're getting so good and so small. In the last week, the Quen, which is an Alibaba open model, an Asian one. So if that is an issue, right? But it is another Chinese-based model like DeepSeek. But the Quen 3.8, this is from memory. I may not have the versions right. I think it's 3.8 is the latest one that was just released, maybe in the last week to 2 weeks. It's 27 billion parameters. That is teeny. Typically, the cloud AI models that you chat with are going to be in the trillions of parameters. This is only 27 billion. It's only 18 gigabytes. And the benchmarks are putting it not above, but it's putting it in the same league as Claude, Gemini, ChatGPT, and Copilot is just another instance of ChatGPT. So that's the optimism for me is that as models get smaller and smaller and more capable, we may then just need those environmental killing data centers only to stream Netflix, and no longer will we need them to run our AIs for us. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, that is encouraging. And a reminder that we're still relatively early in this evolution, right? Things are changing pretty rapidly. Alex, what about you? Anything you want to add?
Yeah, in addition to, I think that the environmental concerns, which I very much share with Josh, I think with any wins that I have with Cloud, where I'm like, wow, this is really cool, this changes my workflow or enhances it. I worry that it's within this proprietary environment where right the cost of that can change very rapidly. My access to that tool can change very rapidly. So yeah, I worry about kind of walling off my skills into in an environment that's not sustainable if I lose institutional access or the Anthropic changes the kind of pricing model. I think that's something that definitely concerns me as I develop these workflows.
Yeah. Thank y'all for that. Anybody else have final thoughts on this question before we start wrapping things up?
Regarding the environmental issue, I had looked that up and because I remember a quote from a while ago. April 21, 2025, OpenAI CEO Sam Altman says that the company spends tens of millions of dollars on electricity costs because people say please and thank you to ChatGPT.
Always be polite to your chatbot. All right. Well, we are right at 3:30, and I have so many more questions for you and would love to just continue this conversation.
Christy has frozen.
Once. Oh no.
No, you're there again. Okay.
There you are.
Oh my goodness.
At
I
least it was right
almost
at
made
the
it
end.
through. Well, I'll try to get through here before the internet kicks me off. But thank you all so much, Audrey, Josh, Alex, Megan, Carrie, for your time today and your insights. This has been wonderful. Thank you all for attending. We will be sharing the recording and the community notes and the slides out with registrants. And you will have that to refer to and share. So thank you all again. Hope everybody has a great rest of the day, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.